the presentation I'll be taking you through will be talking about what if your company had a digital brain. The journey I'll be taking you through this talk will focus on 6 main questions. First is, if this question feels impossible today, then isn't that exactly how every revolution begins? To understand this, let's just walk back in history over different industrial revolutions that we've gone through. Let's start first by the first industrial revolution. With the first industrial revolution, we were able as humans to amplify our physical abilities, basically our muscles. We're now more than able to move different locations much, much faster. Then with electricity, we were able to amplify many more of our capabilities, physical capabilities again. In particular, I'll use an example similar to this hall site. Without it, you wouldn't have been able to see me today, where we don't have any windows or light. Later, we were able to amplify even further with our voices with electronics. So now, even those sitting back or those watching us on the internet are able to hear what we're presenting today in this event. However, we're now on a cusp of a very different event and a very different type of revolution, which is the cognitive revolution. In this in particular, now we start seeing AI changing a great deal of how we operate. It's the first time where now we're amplifying our cognitive abilities. Now, with that said, if we are now able to amplify our cognitive abilities, what does that have as an impact on our own enterprises or our own companies for such? To address this, I'll walk you through a little bit of a journey of what a new concept that's emerging, which is the cognitive enterprise. And what that is basically an enterprise that's able to sense, to reason, to act, and eventually even learn from its mistakes. And with that, now let's take you through a more concrete example of a traditional taxi company versus, in one way or another, an actual Uber, a hair-riding service. Within a traditional taxi company, you'll be calling dispatch, you'll be asking them informing them where you're located. They'll be trying to find manually the closest driver to you. By the time they reach you, there will be the haggling on the price, and till then, eventually, if they reach you, till you actually reach your destination. With Uber, you're talking to the machine directly. In this context, you're only looking at talking to a machine that's able to know exactly where you are, get the best driver for you, analyze and sense what is the traffic that's happening in the area, and even acts accordingly by assigning you the right types of drivers. Now, with that, what happens, of course, is a massive increase in performance. So if we look at the Uber compared to your regular enterprise, whether it's on operational efficiency, customer satisfaction, revenues, or beyond, we start seeing impact after impact on all metrics. In fact, even if we compare the growth of Uber in its rides compared to traditional taxi company, we can see that exponential growth that has happened. Now, if that starts to put in perspective what is a cognitive enterprise, then we start looking at many, many more examples, and statistics today solidify that there is a great deal of productivity enhancement, customer retention, revenues, even cost reductions, and beyond. So with that, this takes me then to that third question. If the impact seems to be real, then what do we actually need to build such enterprises? And to address this, we'll start by the statements of 2 leaders in the field of AI. Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, had a fairly famous statement of today's CEOs will be the last to lead all human workers. Same with Sam Altman, who also has had a statement about them expecting the one-person unicorn, that is, one CEO with all employees being digital. Hence, we start seeing this rise of what's called the digital worker as such. So what that enterprise, the cognitive enterprise, really needs are cognitive workers. With that said, what are those cognitive workers? There are two types. One is the digital workers. These are the knowledge workers that you would expect to manage many of the knowledge activities within your enterprise. The other are the robotic workers. Those are the ones handling a lot of the physical tasks within your enterprise. Together, they operate as these cognitive workers. But alone, they will only be tools. So how do we really even enhance them becoming a workforce? And like in any regular enterprise or company where there is a need for all your employees to have a place to work, many of these digital workers and cognitive workers require also an environment where they would work in. And that's the cognitive operating system. Similar to your iOS on your phones or your Android operating systems. But the difference here is rather than only running applications in silos as tools, it's running digital workers that communicate and talk to each other. So they are a living environment, a space for collaboration. There is a significant shift from tools to a workforce. And of course, they are enhancing your performance. Now, this leads me then to the fourth question. If workers now include these digital colleagues, how do we actually build their digital brains? And that's what we've been doing in our own exercise within our own company. So at Intelmatics, we've been starting to build that first platform for exactly that, which we call EDIX, or the Enterprise Digital Intelligence Platform. With EDIX, we operate on both levels, the micro level and the macro level. On the micro level, we operate on building and providing the building blocks of building these actual digital workers. On the macro level, we also build that operating system that these digital workers live within. So every digital worker should map, since they're employees, to an actual role in your organization. So they actually should have exactly similar roles like any of your own employees. They have to own their outcomes. So they have to be accountable for every outcome they're producing. They're also tiered for readiness. In this sense, they are basically able to understand if there is a need for a human in the loop, a human on the loop, or a human out of the loop. In the case of the Uber example, that's a human out of the loop where there is no human in the mix. They need to continuously improve. They need to have good ability to explain in plain language what is happening if someone is communicating with them. And they have to be cognitive by design. I'll focus on the last component here of the cognitive by design, just to give you, again, some context of what this really implies. So to make this cognitive by design, that implies we need to start now building the actual brain of that digital worker. And like the elements we mentioned earlier, it has to do the four things. It has to first understand how to sense. It has to understand how to reason, act, and learn. And in this context, we build it across four different elements. First is what we call the conics, which is inspired by in the brain's continuum. And that is intended to build the memory, the semantic memory of your enterprise, understanding exactly what's happening from a data perspective. Then that is used by Neurix. Neurix is that second layer on top of this. Now, this is where the ability to reason happens in the brain of this digital worker. it is where analytics and foresight start to occur. And similar to neurons in our brain as well, it analyzes patterns, forecasts, and forecast outcomes and simulates scenarios. Later, we need a third layer which orchestrates between the different activities that are happening, which is similar again to the axons in the brain, where we have execution and orchestration. And last, we have our cortex, which is again similar to the cortex, to provide the ability to communicate with humans and to understand what is happening as well. With these four, we're able to build layers of that digital brain, of that single digital worker. To move from this abstract concept, let me give you more of a concrete example of what are we talking about. So, with that said, let's take a simple example. What's called an expansion analyst in an actual setting of, let's assume a burger chain that's trying to expand. They have an aggressive plan of expansion. One of their workers is an expansion analyst. Their job is to go assess different locations within city or cities, evaluate them, and then assess what's feasible or not. Our own digital worker can do exactly that. It can have, through its connects, understand patterns of data in every city that it operates, looks at traffic, roads, land parts of real estate values, and beyond. It can analyze all of this and build even demographics and build a good understanding of what's happening. Through the layer of the analytics, it understands all the competitors that are happening and what's expected sales that are going to be taken by competitors. In another model, it will understand even how much of cannibalization your own store might affect your store. And on top of that, Axionics then comes in to pull from all of those agents a better understanding of where is the perfect, most optimized location for your store. And finally, of course, that is communicated through Cortex to humans, whether through avatars, visuals, or text. Now, with that said, these digital workers require that environment we mentioned, and our environment provides that shared memory, which is our Edix OS. That shared memory provides that coordination between and multi-worker orchestration, provides a very critical component, which is the guardrails, the compliance and governance for all of these workers, and of course that evolution of the system as a whole. So not just one of those digital workers, but many working together. So with that said, that then leads me to how do we release them? We release them in different sectors as they apply to different sectors. So whether it is in retail or factories or farms, we can now release many of these digital workers to operate in different settings as we release them. Now to the fifth question. If we have built them, what impact are these digital workers already making? And I'll just select a few, give you a little bit of context. So I'll be selecting...
I am Fleet Operations Manager, part of
the Workforce Plan.
Today, I'm holding
the
urgent assignment.
Inventory Manager, the Logistics Coordinator.
I am
each one of them
manager,
producing significant impacts in their own domains. Workforce Planner increases resource utilization by more than 33%. Our Inventory Manager is reducing waste by more than 27%. And our Logistics Coordinator is also producing faster emergency response by more than 56% in all deployed settings, in real settings here in actually the kingdom. With that said, I'll leave you for a minute just to see how these agents operate today and how we also interact with them, whether human in the loop or human out of the loop setting. So the first is the actual the worker planner, workforce planner, which is managing the full kingdom, understanding your workforce in the kingdom. The second was the one which was managing inventory and understanding what's needed. And the third was the one that was managing the dispatchment, again, and the logistics of inspectors within a city for a public organization. And it understands everything of the past, what has happened, it predicts futures, and it takes actions accordingly, where we can turn it into a cognitive mode where it's able to take actions as if they were human employees. Now I'll end with the last 6th question in my presentation. If digital workers are perceived to be powerful, do they actually replace us or free us? And in this, I think the context of regional context does matter significantly. If we were in Europe, China, India, then the challenge of AI is very real in threatening jobs. There is no doubt about it. But within the context of the Gulf in particular, it's actually a different story altogether. In the Gulf, there are more than the current expat population from the labor force represents anywhere between 70 to 95%, depending on which country you're in. So there is a shortage of labor anyway, to start with. And to remedy that, we tend to be filling it in by expat labor. This is where it is a massive opportunity for AI, and in this case, for these digital workers, to remedy a lot of this, where we are able to increase performance. So with that said, this is the first time where we can transform dependency into an opportunity by reducing the dependencies we just mentioned on external labor, by boosting significantly performance, and eventually, as we move from digital workers and cognitive workers to cognitive enterprises, eventually, with many of them, we're able now to create a real cognitive economy. So with that, I'll end with the last slide here. If the past was for us perceived in the last several decades of importing labor to fill in a significant gap, today we're able to build several of these cognitive workers and starting to replace this dependency. In fact, the future that is perceived for us could be by us exporting many of that digital and cognitive capability, and in doing so, exporting that intelligence to the outside, to the world. With that said, thank you so much, and thank you.